나는 딘데 도마 넘버링에 상라 쇼베들이 샤잉.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, good morning. Yeah. 안에 가장 땅 아주 지기 the refugees and around 다간들 갑주 망부지 요롤이야 용구에 디즈니즈 시에브레 제상 가산한다 니즈 선주를 나라 지 drop 지게 나라 미 없이 담바 시도스도 이 drop 지나 고주 미 없이 담바 니만이 샤시서로 고주 가서다 우 매버드지는 이제 이미 다 가시 난 다는 신기 투 딘데니 주요 뉴스안에 투디 로네 민이게즈 시즈로 다들 서로다 이제 가자랑 디 선규를 이제 거야요 알아 제잔다지 이 균전 때내지 아참을라 unbearable somewhere södöme sömek 지 소환을 줘야지.
So there has been some very unfortunate events in the news lately. Some things that happened, and I have to apologize that the English translator who's currently speaking didn't quite catch what His Holiness was talking about in terms of the specific current events, but he referenced some unfortunate current events in which people have died, and there were large number of people who have died due to tragic circumstances in the news recently.
제가 나가서 지 sympathy somewhere understanding of 지부기 벤토가 말해. 지 닌제 양아 somewhere 이제 삼바지비 벤토가 말해. 땅에 버려 될야지 compassion 좀. We need more dedication, more involvement. More action. That is go you in Jusan, Digun then, compassion side, Niji side. Dakandaji, Simjan Hamji, Dongeda tell, sure, Jig, Molam Gabazam, Dongeda Tawaji, Chona, Jimarong Yamarochida. Then Dongeda Tawaji, Chigi in Sambaro, Digi Ningdop down. Dakandaji. Involvement
So in facing these situations, when we hear of these unfortunate events, it's not sufficient for us just to think, oh, those poor people, and have sympathy in that way. We should try to give rise to genuine compassion, a genuine sense of dedication and involvement. More action on our part is required here. So this genuine compassion for all sentient beings isn't just an aspiration that they be free from suffering, but rather it is a commitment. It's a strong longing that they come to be free of suffering, as well as a sense of commitment from ourselves that thinks, I am going to make it so that they become free from suffering.
They have this relatively comfortable life. That is so that give us an rando. That relatively they give you the sida. Energy easy life somewhere. That is gauge they are. Just something also this comfortable in some the mission that to feel other people suffering. This is gonna happen. Just comfortable yes. 다디 균선 때네 다다디 닌지사디 닌지유 동해의 심진지 베게 예버체 닌지enge 가사디 this 가서 in got a good situation of 닌지의 유디 bad situation of this 예버체 good situation 나 예den이 지기겠다 닌지 bad situation 나 예den이 미들레지 닌지도 봐 대비해서 그렇지 다 늦지래도 닌지 사다 가라서나 전이 버리부 동해의 심진티 지 임배 삼으로 시다네 유 가서 imagine somewhere 지 imagination 다 간다 지체체 버리부 동해의 심진의 전이 임배 선하는 become a part of that person to feel that person somewhere 지 dinje chap samtaji dinje industane energy beyond this kind of concept somewhere ji yudang yujensa concept me cheche dinje chatu chade kechom.
So, to update the English language listeners about the remarks that His Holiness began with, he began in his very first remarks of the talk by acknowledging some recent tragedies that are connected to the migration crisis that is afflicting Europe. He mentioned the fact that approximately 40 people who had fled their homelands, their bodies were recently discovered in the back of a truck in Europe. And in another story connected to the migration crisis, there were 200 people who were recently discovered to have died while attempting to arrive on the shores of Europe by boat. And so all of his remarks in the beginning pertaining to connecting to the sufferings of other sentient beings were related, were made with particular reference to those events. So with regard to the most recent segment spoken by His Holiness, he said, we ourselves, for the most part, find ourselves in a comfortable existence, relatively speaking. Relative to many other groups of people in the world, we have a reasonably easy life to live. And sometimes because of this level of comfort, it is hard to feel others' suffering. It is hard to have a direct empathy toward others' suffering. And the practice of genuine compassion isn't one in which we have a great separation between ourselves and the objects of compassion, where one person who is in a good situation feels sympathy for others who are in a bad situation. True compassion is not like that. In the context of true compassion, we ourselves think that we actually are the sentient being who is suffering. We're a part of them. So we use our imagination skillfully in that way to truly identify with the sentient beings who are suffering, thinking to ourselves, I am part of that person. And so in this way, the true compassion goes beyond dualistic concepts, beyond this notion of perceiver and perceived, and a separation between the generator of compassion and the object of compassion.
That's capture the Zolia, Niji Gombe Galia, the social citizen of Che. That the capture the Niji Gombe of Chimayimba. Ranita capture the Vigilia, capture the Zimbe, Mebaru Cheche. That Niji Tone, energy capture a jiggy, that Dungedang, Sonar of the Kadayavati, energy field of Chetterji. Sort of 그렇지. 진짜지 제제 니지 공부해야 돼. 계속 있어서 정도. Yeah.
Therefore, when we are cultivating compassion for refugees, such as the refugees about whom we've been hearing in the news recently, and the refugees who are the victims of these tragic events, we shouldn't approach the practice of compassion in a manner in which we consider ourselves fully established citizens, and the people we're feeling compassion for are the ones who are refugees. Rather, we should use our imagination to identify ourselves as refugees. And in that way, we will become able to make a more intimate connection with the suffering and experience, and we will approach more of an ability to actually feel that suffering and undergo the experiences that these refugees are undergoing.
제당 아주든 저블린디 토리아 간다 즉 상으로 interconnected and interdependent. just nizu kandir chungbe ne the Middle East ba nizu chungbe tel denje azu ji Europe ya da di effect yon de bi da de sebsha de zoblin don la je zang azu sam ji li ji den yin ba ji dang ji le ji due ne ji le ji ra lu ne ye ba de azu xing de wa da yin ne ya that how to take responsibility somewhere that the 강해지래. 가라서 미망부지기 they don't want to take responsibility. They think it's risk or that yana is not prepared somewhere that there is 통치 디시가 많아요. That is 조디 the responsibility the pressure that the burden the masaji deji 가르에 encouragement 선한다도 닝도지당 다는 신기 디 뉴버르지 차버체블이야 아니 닝지기 냠내 과다 계십시다 닝지기 뉴버드 여비입니다 아니 신내지기 the burden heavy with shadi pa transform to cheche akada ningdo to gyoto ya de di kesobra.
These days we are seeing very clearly the nature of interconnectedness of all things in the world. One example of this is that we see that if there's certain conditions that are unstable in the Middle East, then as a result of that, we feel the effects in Europe. And so this interdependent nature of things is very clear. We all can understand how things are mutually dependent in the world, how everything is contingent upon something else. But nevertheless, the question becomes how to take responsibility, how to have a sense of responsibility in relation to that. Many people find that notion of responsibility to be a difficult one to approach. They don't want to have a sense of responsibility. They don't feel prepared to have a sense of responsibility. They feel that it might entail too much risk. And so there is a sense of pressure or burden that seems to go with having compassion. But if we have true compassion, it doesn't have to be that way. If we have true compassion, rather than feeling our interconnectedness with others as a burden or a situation in which there's too much pressure, we can allow that situation to give us more encouragement and strength of heart. So the main ingredient for that encouragement and strength of heart is compassion itself. If we have the power of compassion, then we will be able to transform the sense of burden and the sense of heaviness that goes with the acknowledgement of interconnectedness into a sense of inspiration and encouragement.
다들이 샴라 바바제르스기 공룡디찬 그죠? 제상 가상 공도슈반나 신기 제가 忘了 但是咱们这忙过的样的多，这艰难些的，不就这当往前不是要了，等大那心给，艰难些的不当，大那心给的热点些就了，但得往给其他的不是，但得公路些的往给其他的不是啥，往给type of empowerment 什么的， Abhishek. Chezang yang kyang zu khashegi. Ta nge wang shuya ge ticket nyue chai. Ina yang ko wang kurgu mindu samro yo transfer da. Ta ina de wang ge chira jre sha. Tili ta chiba cha de.
So, in connection with the topic of compassion, as was mentioned before, today we will be doing the meditation transmission of the Noble Avalokiteshvara. And as I also mentioned before, there are many different types of empowerment. There is something called a jenang, which means a permission blessing. There are different forms of grand or great empowerment ceremonies. And there is a subcategory of empowerment called the wisdom transmission or the transmission of awareness. So there's different kind of subcategories of empowerments. And we will be doing a meditation transmission or gomlung of the Noble Avalokiteshvara today, which we can consider to be a type of empowerment. So it's not the traditional or customary Avalokiteshvara empowerment, and therefore some of you might think, well, I purchased a ticket to receive the empowerment of Avalokiteshvara, but he's not giving the empowerment. It's possible that you might think that, but actually what we will be doing today, the transmission we will be going through, is a specific type of empowerment or subcategory of empowerment.
Gomlong chegyu drupdab di da drupjen da pyoge drupjen tangdong gebu zeshebe da drupdab rodyon kageba da di toani gomlong chegyu.
The liturgy that will be the basis of our meditation transmission, the liturgy or sadhana that will be the basis of our meditation transmission, is called the all-pervading benefit to beings, or benefit of beings pervading space. And it was composed by the great Siddha, the great accomplished master from Tibet, whose name was Tangdong Gyalpo.
Na Tangdong Gyalpo sa tunda de da masidi de gemlang ge da yusha. Da dene Tangdong Gyalpo di on ji zhude xian da men zhe qi qie. Gu zi da ren bu shu de qi. Dang bu di Quran de ga zhui ji gu zi de jia dan ni shu za zhang de ji shu de qi da de ji da nga zhu de ji cai ren zi nie de bu qi de ji cai ge da ren zi nie de ba. De ji ba xi ya de. Da dine yang Quran ji social service and rabjire da ka pele ya gebanga mo da ji chu chenbo de zulia pele da chu chenbo de mang wo ba da yin de zulia ji samba me ba chi che and parts of reduce ane da gang ye shi da ye de chi ji zang kong de samba mang bu sui che kong ming le ya chen xin da ji chu do jiak sam ba 망부 겸에 인자 디균셀 때네 주도 작성 바스 데대야 chen shuguyanes.
So in terms of a bit of a background of Tangdong Gyalpo himself, he was a Siddha who was unlike many of the other Siddhas. He was said to have lived a very long life. It's said that he lived into his 120s, and therefore he is renowned to have mastered the siddhi of long life, or he is taught to be a vidyadhara or awareness holder of long life. And in terms of some of the activities he performed, he was famous for having performed many social services for the people of Tibet. So back in the old days of Tibet, there were of course many great rivers, but there were no bridges to cross these rivers, so people found transport to be difficult because of this. And Tangdong Gyalpo constructed many bridges And due to this, one of the names that he was given by the people was the bridge building Siddha, or simply the iron bridge builder.
나 최초 돈이는 지린심시다. 최돈다 주변에 간사. 나는 이제 고랑 추규디 장삼비 리니지 오브 장삼바사 고랑 규버 디스 믹스엔더지 수르도 랑강 수브선라도 규버르비디 총세다 벼레 다는 신 부탄 단 죽으롱바 오마디즈레야 다간다 장삼 베다 리니지 고랑 수르도 좀
And then in terms of his Dharma activities, he of course accomplished a great many deeds. He had a special Dharma lineage of his own, known as the Jaksam lineage, or the Iron Bridge lineage, that was just kind of special to himself, that was kind of its own distinct lineage. And this lineage flourished in Tibet as well as in Bhutan.
다들 공론 셀링엘이야 통마르텔이야 되니 감주심게 제고야래 감주심게 제주산에다 감주심게 대라 지당에 아주 남기용이 감주심게 상계 최소 근데 감주심게 진로를 들이 차야를 되냐 그럼 작삼배 로기 감주 다지 투모메인 비 감주 지야래 제가 대체 통나 야고도 다체 대체 마시나 남규 투모 진로기 상계 최소미 감심 디토는 제나 정도스.
So in terms of the meditation transmission itself, the beginning entails going for refuge and generating bodhicitta. So usually this stage is encapsulated by the single famous verse called in Tibetan the Sangye Chotsokma. In the Buddha Dharma and Assembly, in the Supreme Buddha Dharma and Assembly, I take refuge until attaining enlightenment, and so forth. That's the general refuge and bodhicitta formula connected with the Avalokiteshvara sadhana. However, for the meditation transmission that we're doing here, there is an uncommon series of verses that belongs to the tradition of the Iron Bridge Builder. If we know how to take refuge and engender bodhicitta in accordance with that liturgy, that is the best. But if we aren't familiar with that liturgy, then it's fine for us to go for refuge and engender bodhicitta using the traditional formula in the Supreme Buddha Dharma and Assembly.
Today, that Thomas that didn't go no chevekalea, Missage Lung Ravicha de are that the Lung Sam Masevegi, the visualization which Lomatse Tenejigi so the visualization which Lamema Lung de Maji and the gender Chavada Nyamdo Lomatse the visualization which
So the procedure of the meditation transmission is that it is a lung, or a reading of text, but it's not just a reading of scripture, it also entails visualization. So the main activity engaged in by the students will be visualization, as instructed by the conferrer of the transmission, and the main activity of the master will be the recitation of the reading. And then at times the students will be called upon to repeat certain sections of text after the master. And while they do that, they should do the visualization they will be instructed to do together with the recitation of liturgy.
Today in Uganda, Tomar de Jamdre Dombata short Jamdre Dombaruji, Dineda Gonu Regina, Tene Gonu Chana. That Jamdre Domba delea, they have one full version somewhere. If it's a big celebration, they have a full version of Jamdu Dambajiya Jorba. My version is a little bit kind of lazy version, short version. I will give that first, very short, yeah.
But today we have a circumstance, I think, where some people have requested the refuge vow. And so therefore, we will do a short refuge vow ceremony and then follow that up with beginning the meditation transmission in earnest. So in terms of the refuge vow ceremony, in proper full circumstances of giving the refuge vow, you would have a long ceremony. But my ceremony is a little bit of, as His Holiness said in English, kind of a lazy version of the ceremony. So we're just going to do a short condensed version of a refuge vow ceremony, and then after that proceed with the main meditation transmission.
Ina kab dela jamdru domba saad karasana kan ta di jamdru de promise dabchi ya mena chi kashre agreement dabchi ta ji yong de rang rang la agreement charge ta dinde ji yong ge be indu san ta dinde agreement ji the promise de sunggyub cha la de mutu ne keep the charge Tendalia and Jamdra Labja. So, Jam that the only Jamdra Labja. Or remember that promise because you make promise to uphold that promise or keep that promise. That teacher to Jamdra Labja. The Kunjangel Jabsoni, Jictecho, or Jictecho, Marasa, Jungurba. That Kashi. 당아 점주 넘버 쇼미 가르스타나 점주 랍샤티소 송투사 마르사 마르지 진디지기 데츠 심테로 존데로 이는 예 삼벌데 심리시라고 합니다. 가서 당기 권도 쉬바나시 당부 프로미스 제마제디 소소를 좋아 소술이야 진디지기 가르레지기 promise check develop che tamje check yila zhuwa dang yila tangdui chenbu yewi na ani ji ku jamdu labje sa de rangi ngangi sunga de rangi ngangi yong'a chi automatic yongde a chi tangbu labje chung tene promise che shao kamar ba tangbu promise che tene di keep ja che do energy labja sunga yimi indu de kanges kemi song dosa 다들 주도 소소를 듣듯이 토마드 좋아다 탕드 되녀지 유마이사의 개시슈르샤
Merely going for refuge alone doesn't entail any particular precepts, but when we talk about taking the refuge vow, then this does entail certain promises or agreements, and these are mainly promises that we make to ourselves and agreements that we make with ourselves. And so to support these promises and agreements, we do have a set of instructions called the refuge vow precepts. Basically the refuge vow precepts are supports for maintaining our promise in a continuous way. Some people worry to themselves and think that they shouldn't take the refuge vow because they don't feel they will be able to continuously maintain the promises or agreements or the precepts. But I don't think they need to worry because the desire to make a promise or the making of a promise or agreement is up to oneself. It is oneself that makes this promise or agreement to oneself. And if one has a sense of delight and intention of one's own to make that promise or agreement, then the precepts are something that you would naturally observe. So if you have just a natural inclination or sense of enthusiasm towards maintaining commitment of the refuge vow, then the precepts will come very naturally to you. So having this sense of delight and enthusiasm and desire from one's own side is very important when taking the refuge vow.
다 샴라 겸주 도보도도 지안 도시 제가 참에 데 겸주 domba 지 슌되게 다 가시지요래 제가 지 냠도 소로나스.
So now we will begin a short refuge ceremony in earnest, and those of you who wish to take the refuge vow at this time, please recite together with me.
다 두 데네
Dine,
손데
Sungde,
상게라
Sangela,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
최라
Chola,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
겐든라
Gendunla,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
다
Da,
두
Du,
데네
Dine,
손데
Sungde,
상게라
Sangela,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
최라
Chola,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
겐든라
Gendunla,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
다
Da,
두
Du,
데네
Dine,
손데
Sungde,
상게라
Sangela,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
최라
Chola,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
겐든라
Gendunla,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio.
데네 enge tab yino shesa qablia leksu sunche dikal kemredo sobe bazu.
Next, when I say tapyeno, you respond by saying lexo. Tapyeno means that is the method, lexo means excellent. So when I say tapyeno, you respond by saying lexo, and that is the moment directly after which you will receive the actual refuge vow.
Tab yino
Lexo.
다 디젤라다 밥체레스 공룡차래 다 공룡치도 담보 겹심치야 인두산에 다 겹이 초신 셋다버사든지 고야라다 초신 참에 들지 냠뇽유에는 대신가래 냠뇽면은 다 초신 셋다버사든 시다샤 하고 말아 다들 간다래 링기 남게 내서 아니 지 겹네 지 라마 다나 상계 쉐 긴두 다나 신기 지 이담 다 칸로사르다 상화 지 간다 수수의 가지지 삼로당 투버를 가지지 삼당 투버들 뉴기 나와내서 예사바체 에 대다고 눈도 에너지 가르래 감주시 자다 안다나 신기
So now we will begin the meditation transmission of the Noble Avalokiteshvara, and the first stage of the meditation transmission is refuge and bodhicitta. For this stage, it is traditionally instructed that we visualize a field of merit or a field of refuge in the sky in front of us. So those of you who have familiarity with visualizing a field of refuge in the sky in front will find this, will be able to resort to your memories of having done this. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, the basic notion here is that you imagine that in the sky in front of you are present all of the objects of refuge, the gurus, the Buddhas, the Dharma, the Sangha, the Yidam deities, the Dakinis, and so forth. Basically, you just do your best to imagine this, and you visualize or imagine that they are in the sky in front of you, and that in front of them you will go for refuge and engender bodhicitta.
대한테는 도마를 당기 건드시면 작삼루기 깜주도 차요. 인두산에 아드냠도 젠드나체 젠드낭보다 냠도 다지 당기 건드시면 신기 다지 수삼루 미바대로 되게 냠도 나체 나오나. 그래.
As I said before, in terms of the liturgy that we will use, it is the liturgy from the Iron Bridge Builder tradition, this unique tradition of Tangtong Gyalpo. So I will ask you to repeat the words of this liturgy after me. And while you are doing that, please engage in the visualization or imagination practice that was just explained in terms of visualizing the field of refuge before you in the sky.
남가당 냠베
Nyambe,
셈젠 탐제
Semjen Tamje,
라마
Lama,
상게
Sangye,
림보체라
Rinpochela,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
상게
Sangye,
최당
Chodang,
겐듄
Gendun,
남라
Namla,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
라마
Lama,
예담
Yidam,
칸드
Kandu,
소알라
Tsola,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
랑셈
Rangsem,
동살
Dongsal,
최기
Chugi,
꿀라
Gula,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio.
second time.
Now for the second time.
남가당
Namkadang,
냠베
Nyambe,
셈젠
Semjen,
탐제
Tamje,
라마
Lama,
상게
Sangye,
림보
Rimbo,
체라
Chela,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
상게
Sangye,
최당
Chodang,
겐듄
Gendun,
남라
Namla,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
라마
Lama,
예담
Yidam,
칸드
Kandu,
소알라
Tsola,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
랑셈
Rangsem,
동살
Dongsal,
최기
Chugi,
꿀라
Gula,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio.
third time.
Now for the third time.
남가당
Namkadang,
냠베
Nyambe,
셈젠
Semjen,
탐제
Tamje,
라마
Lama,
상게
Sangye,
림보
Rimbo,
체라
Chela,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
상게
Sangye,
최당
Chodang,
겐듄
Gendun,
남라
Namla,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
라마
Lama,
예담
Yidam,
칸드
Kandu,
소알라
Tsola,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio,
랑셈
Rangsem,
동살
Dongsal,
최기
Chugi,
꿀라
Gula,
겹수
Gyapsu,
치오
Chio.
다디 제소다 심게 차데레 드린두산에 지기 심제 함제 조바상게 공발을 거버 차스나 라도 다도나 심제 함제 지 간다를 지게 터두기 대화래야 거버 차 디체도 파버제레스기 곰대 냠솔랑기 냠바로 든지기 다 셈라 매버로 제제 이 셈게의 진주죠.
Next is the liturgy for engendering bodhicitta, and the basic meaning of bodhicitta is that we intend or wish to, or wish and intend, to establish all sentient beings in the state of perfect Buddhahood. So we have this wish and develop this intention to establish all sentient beings in the ultimate state of happiness. And here, in particular, we give rise to the intention that in order to bring that about, I will practice the meditation and recitation of the Noble Avalokiteshvara. So bearing this intention in mind, please repeat after me.
Semjen,
Semjen,
Tamje,
Tamje,
Yang Tabar,
Yang Tagbar,
Zobe,
Zobe,
Sangyeki,
Sangyeki,
Kopang, Tobar, Cha,
Kompang Toparcha,
Ti,
Te,
Chedo,
Te, Chedu,
Paba,
Pakpa,
Tuje,
Tugje,
Chenbu,
Chenbu,
Gomde,
Gomde,
Nyamso,
Nyamso,
Langwar,
Langwar,
Gyo.
Gyo.
Second time.
Now for the second time.
Semjen,
Semjen,
Tamje,
Tamje,
Yang Tabar,
Yang Tagbar,
Zobe,
Zobe,
Sangyeki,
Sangyeki,
Kompang,
Kompang,
Tobar,
Tobar,
Cha,
Cha,
Tei,
Tei,
Chedo,
Chedu,
Paba,
Pakpa,
Tuje,
Tugje,
Chenbu,
Chenbu,
Gomde,
Gomde,
Nyamso,
Nyamsu,
Langwar,
Langwar,
Gyo.
Gyo.
Third time.
Now for the third time.
Semjen,
Semjen,
Tamje,
Tamje,
Yang Tabar,
Yang Tagbar,
Zobe,
Zobe,
Sangyeki,
Sangyeki,
Kopang,
Kopang,
Tobar,
Tobar,
Cha,
Cha,
Tei,
Tei,
Chedo,
Chedu,
Paba,
Pakpa,
Tuje,
Tuje,
Chenbu,
Chenbu,
Gomde,
Gomde,
Nyamso,
Nyamsu,
Langwar,
Langwar,
Gyo.
Gyo.
다 디제소든 지 제네시기 꾸고메아들.
Next is the visualization of the form of Avalokiteshvara.
다人이 지위조 다 지당 다的 심지어 탐지의 지위조도 사죠. 다 이내 조조의 人이 지위조 고만 개체면으로 심지어 탐지 고한데 남산남산 깔아하고도 장기 지위조도 아니 배만 깔보단 다외 댕기 띵도 다 배만 깔보단 다외 댄사데 배만 깔보 되기 에너지 인중기 삼바쳐야지 디디는 다외 긴걸 되기 에네 군수 장주기 셈 쳐야를 진짜 삼단 주기 정도 다 디디도 파바제스 차시바 지 견다처럼 용수 줘봐 근데 주의 봐서
So for this, we visualize above the crown of our head and above the crown of our head of all sentient beings. But to make a clarifying comment about that, this visualization is traditionally said to be done in a way in which we visualize Avalokiteshvara above our own head, as well as above the heads of all sentient beings, of each and every sentient being. But as to that, I think it's much more important and approachable at this stage for us to concentrate simply on the visualization of Avalokiteshvara above the crown of our own head. It'd be very, I think, difficult in the beginning to try to have a clear visualization or a detailed visualization of Avalokiteshvara above the heads of each and every sentient being. So we can concentrate just on the visualization of Avalokiteshvara above our own head for now. So we visualize that above our head there appears a white lotus and a moon disk seat. The white lotus symbolizes the desire to be free or renunciation, and the moon disk seat represents relative bodhicitta. And then we visualize on top of that white lotus and moon disk seat, there appears the Noble Supreme Avalokiteshvara with 4 arms, complete in all ornaments and attire.
The form, detail of form, the telia be samong was dance. Tunda the samsta down to me. That this is visualization, that's the form that's all to not something what Trisha. Gabdelia Chenrezig do individual deity in the Gom Debra Mayba. That Delia Ranigi Lamadang, or Yerma Chibi, then Papa Chenrezig. That Delia Sanget Hamji, that under she gives some good to Denis and Andando, that under she Sanget Hamji. Sangology, Papa Chenrezig, chill, number the Papa Chenrezig in Bala, Nando, and the Gawatamjig Ranshi. Children do the other chick, there is some large. Laver do the Gawatamjig and Tuzi Shembo. The Niji Shimbu, Nuba Sanglo, Jig to Bony. The collected research, Jig to Boon Jenny, dark under Jiggy. Papa Chenrezig number of chili, True Devonage. That is something what gets
Some people, when they visualize, they get so concentrated and focused on trying to get each and every detail of the form correct in their visualization, and they don't think so much about the meaning of these attributes. That would be a very difficult way to visualize. The main, most important point is the meaning of the visualization, not the appearances of the visualizations themselves. And so we should reflect mainly on the meaning that is being highlighted here. So Chenrezig, doing the visualization of Chenrezig isn't just visualizing an individual deity, but rather it involves having an outlook toward Avalokiteshvara by which we see this appearance of Avalokiteshvara as being an embodiment of all Buddhas, and furthermore, we regard the deity of Avalokiteshvara as being inseparable in essence from our own guru. We regard Avalokiteshvara as being inseparable from our own guru in essence, as well as being the single embodiment of all of the 3 jewels, all of the 3 objects of refuge, all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and this single embodiment of all of these is appearing in the aspect of the deity Avalokiteshvara. So, not only is Avalokiteshvara the single embodiment of our guru, as well as all Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and so forth, but in particular, Avalokiteshvara is the embodiment of all of the energy of the great compassion of all Buddhas. All compassion of all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas collected or amassed together, and that collected and amassed form of all of the compassion of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas shines as this one aspect of Avalokiteshvara.
다 들려야 지 진지지가 누버셔 보시죠 인자 다 들려야 radiation the whether 가동하데 뭐 쳐야 되지 밴다 니말이야 radiation 첨부여로 님의 웹 디베 마일 밀리망 뭐 정도 어디는 신을 치기 다가들 누버셔 보시죠 인자 디도 radiation 세나다도 the web never chick the under using other never trade them chick. The under the jiggy, and that you so similar, Tomar kind of move somebody, Ningly, Gugoy, which moved with Cheche, and Sword again, Diggy, Ningly Gugor give. The Digi Chen, the Digi Jebe Tone, and the Chenrezig which come Yimina, then she. 가수라다지 선보를 시험도 다 form the detail this sometimes 되비나 다 sculpture so 된 게로 차로 안들이 인도산 드점이 비체 겁들이야다 선보를 비치듯이 대야 지 니지 누바 지금 living sort of compassion 누바 첨부지 요한들 지삼도 가다 개점으로야
So obviously, since Avalokiteshvara embodies and represents all of the compassion of all of the Buddhas, we're dealing with a great power here, a great energy. And this energy radiates light of 5 colors in all directions. So the radiation of light coming from the form of Avalokiteshvara is, in this way, very powerful. Just like the sun radiating sun rays. The rays of the sun, the light of the sun, travel millions and billions of miles. So in the same way, light rays of 5 colors, very powerful light rays of love and compassion, radiate from the body of Avalokiteshvara here. This is what we imagine. And when we imbue our visualization with this type of imagination and with this type of meaning, it becomes something that can actually move our heart, that can affect some type of shift in our mind and our heart. And if we do the visualization of Avalokiteshvara from within this state of being moved, then I think that our practice will definitely be one of living compassion that is very much alive. So that is the best way to do this practice, rather than focusing just on the visual details and trying to get them as exact as possible. That's just like taking a scan or receiving a fax. But rather than approaching it that way, we should try to feel the power of compassion in our hearts and have the practice be an instance of living compassion.
Sculpture 수두산다 아주 넘지 소신 거마라 지수디 참참 나레레차 참참 미 야보지 마장고 고레레차 단람도 차로도 근데 된다고 마차버체 딱 안들 give birth somewhere 지금 근데 living 딱 안다 지 제스 이름 지 give birth 좀 제가 이제
So it's not like a sculpture. It's not like the form of the deity is not like a sculpture. That would be a very difficult position to be in if we ourselves were a sculpture. But rather, it is a living being and a living compassion that we're connecting with. Or it is rather that the compassion we're connecting with is alive in the manner that a living being is alive. And it is an alive type of compassion that we are connecting with. So please repeat after me. So we don't need to fold our hands in Anjali when we do the repetition of the lines of liturgy. It's mainly about meditation at this point, so we don't need to fold our hands when we do this recitation.
다소
Daso
가geb
kakyab
심진
simjin
기
ki
지주
jitsu
베가르
bekar
다웨
dawe
띵
ding
실레
shile
파초
pakcho
제레
jenre
세
se
가르세
karsil
웬데 웨셀
wisir
ngan데
ngaden
초
cho
젠줌
zezum
투지
tuje
젠기
jengi
세
se
차시
chakshi
당보
tangbo
태절
taljar
제
ze
원이
woni
신팅
shilteng
베가르
bekar
남
nam
다르당
tardang
rinjen
rinchen
gengi
gengi
제
de
제다
jeda
바베
pakbe
되요
deyo
솔
sol
외바
weba
메베
mebe
우긴
ugen
젠
jen
샵니
japni
돌지
dorji
기중
kinjong
쇼
shu
제메
jime
다와르
davar
겹데
gapten
바
ba
겹네
gapne
군두
kundu
ngor
ngobor
귤
kyur
다들 렌숨 젠두치고 도디네 다들 렌숨 젠두치 렌 당부 젠두치 살아다 니바디 니만데 되샤 가수 공대시 현점으로 오늘 전 렌숨 젠두죠.
So the traditional method here is to repeat this section of the text after the Master 3 times, and we have now completed 1 round of repetition after the Master, conferring the empowerment or conferring the transmission. But what we will do going forward for the second repetition is that I will simply recite the liturgy on my own, and while I am reciting, you yourselves can be doing the meditation. So you don't have to repeat after me for this round.
다소 가geb의 심진기 지주 베가란 다웨디 실레 파조 제레시 가세 외세 안덴초 젠줌은 투지 젠기에시 차시 당부 대절은제 원이 신진 베가르나마 다르단 린진 genge제 제다 바베 되요스 외바 메베 우겐제 샤브니 도지 기중쇼 제면 다워르 겹덴바 겹네 군두 ngoro yoro 다소 가geb의 심진기 지주 베가란 다웨딩 실레 파조 첸레시 karse vezre nganden cho zenzumen tuji jengi se chashi tambo tejiranze woni 신진 백르남 다르단 린진 gengeje rida pabe teyose weba mebe ugenje shamye dorji gidronsho chemen davre gyabdenba gyamne kundu ngoroygoro 다 직탐한디 내 니제도 shagoda.
We will now repeat after His Holiness the final line of the liturgy of this section 2 times. Ngoworgyur, gyapne, kundu, ngoworgyur.
다 디젤이야 바보 제네스기데 쇠նդ비치하는데 쇠նդ비 될래양 됐네 쇠նդ비 듀버치야 되네 주전 당동게 보코랑기 개왕우마 기 될라지 개론 빼만 가보사 개론 빼만 가보사 근데지 개왕우마 개론 빼만 가보사지 교배 qabla 바보 제네스기 쇠նդ비치 Korangi nyamnena papa chenes swendip geba tadi tuzu yana swendip geba dinde tuzu mebi nanam yu swendip duba dinde anru trishore jazan dinde swendip duba chai.
The next section of the sadhana liturgy is a supplication to Avalokiteshvara, and today we will recite the abbreviated supplication composed by Tangtong Gyalpo. However, there is a more extensive supplication which was composed by a person named Bhikshu Pemakarpo or Gelong Pemakarpo, the monk Pemakarpo, who himself was a previous incarnation of Tangtong Gyalpo. In other words, a being who was an antecedent of Tangtong Gyalpo in terms of incarnation. And so at that time, the Bhikshu Pemakarpo composed a long supplication to Avalokiteshvara that became part of the heart practice of Tangtong Gyalpo himself. So in terms of instruction for the future, if you have time, then you should recite the extensive version of the supplication. Today, since our time is limited, we will recite the abbreviated or short version of the supplication.
다다 고는 주면은 싱 다디 swendip chebe 걸래 다다 고는 랑게 지우 줄라 다간들 상계 탐지기 니지 뉴베 니지 등이 되지 제레스 주여버지 된다 다 퀄리티 인더버지 주여버지 it's no longer individual or person 다들 될래야 지 similar draw 첨부시게 되게 연된텔라 draw 삼바자 첨부시게 제수 이랑 삼바자 첨부 다가는 신기 다텔레야 다 가르치지 원도 초백 삼바르지 다텔레야 지 샘디 텔레야 베지 가르 look up someone that is some which they tell you want to shop samba catch and board again then it's send the gender show. I don't know how to say that. To delight Senator Da. Yeah. Oh.
So for this stage of the supplication, once again, the visualization is to imagine that Avalokiteshvara sits above the crown of our head as the embodiment of the energy of compassion of all Buddhas. And that is the key quality that we're focusing on here. We're not focusing on some individual who is present above our heads or some type of person who is present above our heads or even some type of individual deity figure who is above our heads. But the main thing that we want to focus on is the quality that deity is a symbol of, the quality that that deity represents. So we focus on this presence of the energy of great compassion. And at this stage in particular of doing this application, we should give rise to great and strong delight in our minds toward that quality, a great, strong appreciation of this quality of great compassion, a very vast and powerful sense of rejoicing in this quality of great compassion, orienting our minds toward this great compassion, looking up to this great compassion, and pointing ourselves in that direction. So this is the attitude that we bear in mind while reciting this supplication. So for this stage, please repeat after me. And this segment of the text, for this segment of the text, it is appropriate to join our hands in Anjali.
조
Gyöngi,
마그 군도
Gundo,
까르
Gar,
조상
Zosang,
예예
Gegi,
울라
Ula,
겐
Gen,
투지
Tuji,
쟁기
Gengi,
롤라
Drola,
세
Se,
제레
Genre,
세라
Sigla,
차제
Changce,
로
Lo,
조
Chowo,
교행기
Gyöngi,
마그
Magu,
군도
Gundo,
까르
Gar,
조상
Zosang,
예예
Gegi,
울라
Ula,
겐
Gen,
투지
Tungji,
쟁기
Gengi,
롤라
Drola,
세
Se,
제레
Genre,
세라
Sila,
차세
Changce,
로
Lo,
조
Chowo,
교행기
Gyöngi,
마그
Magu,
군도
Gundo,
까르
Gar,
조상
Zosang,
예기
Gegi,
울라
Ula,
겐
Gen,
투지
Tungji,
쟁기
Gengi,
롤라
Drola,
세
Se,
제레
Genre,
세라
Sigla,
차세
Changce,
로
Lo.
다디 제레 수수 딘데베다지 셈레야지 소와타바 세난자도 셈레다지 파바제레 세기 다칸들 니지 런 가르 니지 등니제 파바제레 텔레 션데당 제수 이랑와당데 디 셈레야 조와치 무슈제베 디기 톱 텔레 덴세네 아니 라기 지비주도 예베 파바제레 당기들지 배 외스릉 안데도 트레데베 외스베 알레가 수체와 트레네 초준지 딩게 감탐젤 캡네 아니 지게 지 뉴주 내셔널 인바이런먼트 서머 뉴주기 다지 견단지 다나 디자스터 가르 뉴주리아지 다지 pollution 차들 여러 다들 마다바단지 pollution 지보만 딱 마다베 탐제바 매버스체 나주 있으면 탐제기 다지 치다 난게 동야 탐제 시네 아지 가르쳐다지 파바제스기 다 구송도스 예르마시버로 드리지기 간다라 탐제 넘버 타버로 드리지 차송 냐버로지 드리지 매워서 가르샤
having supplicated in this way, having supplicated the embodiment of all compassion of all of the Buddhas, and given rise to great, powerful delight and enthusiasm toward that, by the power of our supplication, by the power of our great enthusiasm, and by the power of our great delight, we imagine that the 5 colored light rays emanating from the body of Avalokiteshvara shine even more brightly than before, radiate even more powerfully than before. These light rays travel throughout all of the worlds there are, radiating in all 10 directions, filling all of the realms of sentient beings, and purifying the outer environment and its inner contents. In terms of the outer environment, the light rays strike all of the worlds there are, purifying all impurities of the outer world, such as disasters, such as pollution. All impurities there could be are purified by the light rays. In terms of the inner content or the inner inhabitants of the environment, we imagine that the light rays strike all sentient beings, completely cleansing all of their inner and outer sufferings, and establishing them in a state that is inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of Avalokiteshvara. Please repeat after me. And the hands are down at this stage. They are not in Anjali. Tetar,
Tseji,
Tseche,
Soldab,
Soltap,
Be,
Be,
Pabe,
Pakbe,
Kule,
Kule,
Wesere,
Wuser,
Che,
Che,
Mada,
Mada,
Lenang,
Lenang,
Chushe,
Tushe,
Jiang,
Jang,
Chinu,
Chenu,
Dewa,
Dewa,
Jengi,
Jengi,
Xing,
Xing,
Nangju,
Nangju,
Genju,
Gendu,
Lunga,
Lunga,
Sem,
Sem,
Jere,
Jenre,
Sewang,
Sewang,
Gusong,
Kusong,
To,
Tu,
Nanja,
Nangta,
Rigdong,
Rikdong,
Yerme,
Yerme,
Gyuru,
Gyur,
Tedar,
Tedar,
Tseji,
Tseche,
Soldab,
Sultap,
Be,
Be,
Pagbe,
Pakbe,
Kule,
Kule,
Wesere,
Weser,
Che,
Che,
Mada,
Mata,
Lenang,
Lenang,
Chushe,
Tushe,
Jiang,
Jang,
Chinu,
Chinu,
Dewa,
Dewa,
Jengi,
Jengi,
Xing,
Xing,
Nangju,
Nangju,
Genju,
Gendu,
Lunga,
Lunga,
Sem,
Sem,
Jere,
Jenre,
Sewang,
Sewang,
Gusong,
Kusong,
To,
To,
Nanja,
Nangta,
Rigdong,
Rikdong,
Yerme,
Yerme,
Gyuru,
Gyur,
Tedar,
Tetar,
Tseji,
Tsechik,
Solda,
Sultap,
Be,
Be,
Pabe,
Pakbe,
Kule,
Kule,
Wesere,
Wuser,
Che,
Che,
Mada,
Mada,
Lenang,
Lenang,
Chushe,
Tushe,
Jiang,
Jang,
Chinu,
Chinu,
Dewa,
Dewa,
Jengi,
Jengi,
Xing,
Xing,
Nangju,
Nangju,
Genju,
Gendu,
Lunga,
Lunga,
Sem,
Sem,
Jere,
Jenre,
Sewang,
Sewang,
Gusong,
Kusong,
To,
Tu,
Nanja,
Nangta,
Rigdong,
Rikdong,
Yerme,
Yerme,
Gyuru.
Gyur.
다 되는 디젤이야 파바제스기 숭아 이게 주메게 다 공로샤도 스레 다데 망고지 지라시아 규주민도 이게 주메제도 나로나.
The next stage is the transmission of the 6-syllable mantra of the Noble Supreme Avalokiteshvara. There are, of course, many explanations and teachings that go along with the meaning of the 6-syllable mantra and so forth, but we are limited in our time together this morning, And so instead of giving a teaching in connection with this, I will simply give the transmission of the mantra and have you repeat it after me.
Tinanda dikal specifically samarbal do riki draw rijuki simje susu da dunga ser did specifically the sometime is that is
One comment I will make is that we can have the knowledge as we recite the 6-syllable mantra that each of the 6 syllables of the mantra corresponds with liberating one particular realm from among the 6 realms of samsara. So each of the 6 syllables performs the function of giving liberation to the beings in each of the 6 realms of samsara, or in one specific realm of the 6 realms of samsara.
Om Mani
Padme
Hong Om Mani
Padme
Hong
Om
Mani
Mani
Padme
Hong.
That is nyamdo sakashide.
And now we will recite the mantra a few times together in unison.
Oi mani me oi mani be me oi mani be me oi mani be me Da di je le pa Chenrezig ran ju zu le pa Chenrezig dia ren ni le tim ni. An ji pa ju ji su su gi. Da ji lu gi be ji ka ju da ji cha xie cha mu ju je le da di kyep xie an tim ni. An ji rang gi lu nga ye su de pa Chenrezig gu song tu su yer ma chi ba ju su nya ba ji da. Rani and Yawa Tamjegi Daji Tuji Niji Shimbu that nobody that around the Yawa Miabachen, the Karjuji the Chula Chusha with the Chonso summer of Chita. Rani Daji Yawa Tamjegi Tuji Shimbu that runs over the Chasso summer of the Miabachen, the general.
The next stage of the practice is that the noble Avalokiteshvara above the crown of our heads dissolves into ourselves. And so we visualize and imagine that this happens. And we imagine that as it does, that our entire body is pervaded by the dissolution of Avalokiteshvara into ourselves. Even the smallest particles in our body are transformed by this. And we imagine further that our own body, speech, and mind becomes inseparable from the enlightened body, speech, and mind of Avalokiteshvara. Our own body, speech, and mind becomes inseparable from the energy of all of the compassion of all Buddhas, and that we ourselves become inseparable from the compassion of all Buddhas, like water being poured into water.
다신
Shin,
륜낭
Lunang,
파베
Pakbe,
고
Go,
자자
Dada,
예게
Yige,
총매
Tugme,
양
Yang,
전도
Tendo,
예시
Yeshe,
첸부
Chenbu,
롱
Long,
다신
Dashin,
륜낭
Lunang,
파베
Pakbe,
고
Go,
자자
Data,
예게
Yige,
초베
Tugbe,
양
Yang,
전도
Tendo,
예시
Yeshe,
첸부
Chenbu,
롱
Long,
다신
Dashin,
륜낭
Lunang,
파베
Pakbe,
고
Go,
자자
Data,
예게
Yige,
초베
Tugbe,
양
Yang,
전도
Tendo,
예시
Yeshe,
첸부
Chenbu,
롱
Long,
다 디지는 오면 시아들의 개완디 사부터 되는 이제 로아 탐제 세상에 살 가르쳐야지 가르쳐도 제레서 공부 도와르부터 이제 오면 시아래 디아진을
The next stage is the dedication of merit and aspiration for the conclusion. So at this stage, we think to ourselves, or aspire to ourselves, or dedicate the merit by thinking through this virtue, through these roots of virtue that have been accumulated here, may all beings attain the state of the noble and supreme Avalokiteshvara. Bearing this in mind, please repeat after me.
개와
Gewa,
디
Di,
뉴르도
Nyurdo,
다
Da,
첸레
Chenre,
세왕
Siwang,
drukyur
Drumkyur,
네
Ne,
조와
Drowa,
지경
Chigang,
마류
Malu,
빠
Pa,
대이
Tei,
살라
Sala,
괴버
Gebar,
쇼
Sho,
개와
Gewa,
디
Di,
뉴르도
Nyurdo,
다
Da,
첸레
Chenre,
세왕
Siwang,
drukyur
Drupkyur,
네
Ne,
조와
Drowa,
지경
Chigang,
마류
Malu,
빠
Pa,
대이
Tei,
살라
Sala,
괴버
Gebar,
쇼
Sho,
개와
Gewa,
디
Di,
뉴르도
Nyurdo,
다
Da,
첸레
Chenre,
세왕
Siwang,
drukyur
Drupkyur,
네
Ne,
조와
Drowa,
지경
Chikyang,
마류
Malu,
빠
Pa,
대이
Tei,
살라
Sala,
괴버
Gebar,
쇼
Sho.
다디 제네스 공론의 사백
This completes the meditation transmission of Avalokiteshvara.
다디 쇼데 말람스 되고 있으래.
So now I think an aspiration will be recited. I think
예마원자
we'll recite an aspiration together.
다예다 예수 저원도 제천본다愿都身本都见都能sanye chansen pamen goro ye goro deye nganzra bado meba 你的我亲戚家为心感的，得如今的慈悲有马达，给我心也怕马是巴如，得如给你那的。我的给大给面南大白衣，如知三业长生人当知业，给面主不拉心业老多数，地亚他变咱这呀，阿不达那。所求的要在这公从你做了这也让大给的送给扫把，滚着送了这把。Eden ban bir gürce ge o semcen gılango Droge sange do gürce ge zadam ce düne Dajin güla men gürce cimyedan 소조 네 제레 네메 냠도데 센데 사존는 그로지 남제 세베 교마다 데오 노게 그로지 게네 베멘 가제네 자존 지세바 르벤로 젠바라쇼 소남데에 담제 세바니 도네니 자나 범제네 개가 나제 발라조 세베 솔렌로 조와